Hey guys, welcome to Module 1. So each week what I like to do is have a short module lecture over the writing assignment so you have a good idea as to what the expectations are and more importantly what I'm looking for as I review your submissions. Okay, so what I have here on the screen is the assignment guidelines and grading rubric for your first assignment, which is a journal assignment. And so your focus this week is going to be on exploring the pros and cons of body-worn cameras that are used by law enforcement officers. And what I just want to touch over briefly here before I go into the lecture itself is just to highlight some of the key takeaways and things for you to keep in mind as you work on this writing assignment for this week. So as you can see here, it says specifically you need to address the following criteria. So you need to make sure you address the specific critical elements for this assignment. And this particular assignment is unique in the sense that you have to make sure that your responses include a minimum number of words, all right? So in order to earn the maximum number of points for this assignment, you need to make sure that you fulfill this requirement. So, for example, in describing the pros of using body cameras and the cons of using body cameras, your response needs to be between 50 and 75 words, okay, as part of your explanation. The second part here is elements of the criminal justice system and elements of society. And this particular critical element requires that your response be 100 to 150 words. So you need to make sure as you're working on this that you fulfill this particular part of the writing assignment. All right, so in total then, this assignment should be between 300 and 450 words in length. Your sources should be cited using APA style, and you can consult the Shapiro Library APA style guide for more information on citations. In our early announcements this week, I will post, for lack of a better word, like a cheat sheet for you to take a look at, and hopefully it'll help you as you develop your skills associated with citing and referencing sources using APA style, which is very common in the social sciences, of which criminal justice is located. Okay, so those are some key takeaways. And here's the grading rubric. So you have 3 ratings that are going to be available this week: proficient, needs improvement, and not evident. So please make sure that you address each of these 4 specific critical elements as you work on your journal entry this week. If you want to use headings, go ahead. So if you want to have a heading pros of body cameras and then your response, followed by cons of using body cameras, followed by your response, that'll be fine if that works for you. But just make sure that you can use this, the grading rubric here as your outline. I think that'll help you out. One final thing I want to make a quick note here for the grading rubric is you have an evaluation for citations and attributions. And basically what this means is you need to offer some evidence of research in your journal entry this week. Both of these, the topic this week's in terms of determining and describing the pros and cons of body cameras, there's a lot of information out there. You can find some in our textbook, and a lot of this information can be used to support your position. So if, for example, you're going to make an argument that the use of body cameras reduces the number of police officer complaints, then you need to go ahead and make sure you can support that. And whether it be your textbook or whatever the module resources that we have, that would be the source for your citation and reference, okay? And I'll talk about that a little bit later in my general overview, right? So that is basically what this assignment entails and some of the key takeaways associated with the assignment guidelines and grading rubric. And so now I'm just going to do a short lecture, in which I'll give you an example as to what I'm looking for this week. Okay, so let me switch slides here, just one second. Okay, we're back. So again, this week we're looking at the pros and cons of body-worn cameras, and they're commonly called BWCs. So if you see that reference in any of your modular material or your textbook, that's what it's referring to. So first, let me just explain what a body-worn camera is for those of you who may not be familiar. Body-worn cameras are small cameras which can be clipped onto a police officer's uniform or worn as a headset and turned on to record video and audio of law enforcement encounters with the public. The video is often saved with time and date stamps and GPS coordinates. So this picture here, you can see, here's an example of what a body-worn camera looks like. He's got his posted right there or attached. Some officers will attach it right here in the middle. Again, it's just a relatively small device that is now commonly part of the police officer uniform for those agencies that use body-worn cameras. So this week you have to look at, for example, the pros for body-worn cameras. Again, 50 to 75 words. So I'm just going to give you one pro. And then as part of your assignment, I would expect that you would develop 3 or 4 pros associated with body-worn cameras as part of your analysis. So one of the pros for body-worn cameras is increased accountability. And that's often seen today. If you watch the news, any type of an officer-involved shooting that is controversial within a community, the public calls for the release of the body-worn cameras so the public and the community has an idea as to what exactly transpired. And so there are 2 examples that I can illustrate to help illustrate this point. One of them, if you recall, in Columbus, Ohio, the police shooting of Makia Bryant. Now remember, Makia Bryant was a juvenile and a Columbus police officer arrived on the scene, a report of a disturbance of some sort, a fight. And while the officer was there, he sees this young woman attempting to stab another female, and he fired and used deadly force, and ultimately Makia Bryant died. So that body-worn camera video was brought and made available to the public relatively quickly, so that it would support what the officer believed were proper actions in terms of use of deadly force. Okay, so that's just one example. Another example, if you've been following the news recently, is the Brooklyn Center, Minneapolis police shooting of Dante Wright and the conviction of Officer Kim Potter. Now that video was used. So the prosecution used that video, and I'm sure the defense used that video for what it thought benefited their client. But the key here is that the whole point of, one of the points, I guess, of using body-worn cameras is this idea of increased accountability. And accountability ultimately leads to public trust. So in terms of cons for body-worn cameras, again, 50 to 75 words. One of the cons associated with body-worn cameras that's often cited is they're too expensive. Maybe they're unreliable for many law enforcement agencies. For instance, the city of Baltimore, Maryland, in 2015 budgeted $11.3 million for body-worn cameras, but by 2020, those costs rose to over $35 million. And that's an array of factors, not only the costs for the body-worn cameras. Obviously, the more officers you have, the more money it's going to cost. Another hidden cost that many people don't realize is the cost associated with storing all of this data. And then how long are you going to keep this data? So the longer you keep it, the more storage space you need, and storage space can cost money. So that's one of the common issues that pop up when the topic of the cons of body-worn cameras comes into play, is they're expensive and unreliable for law enforcement agencies. And unreliable in the sense that perhaps if you buy a cheaper model, it malfunctions, or if the officer is in a fight of some sort, the body camera gets knocked off and sort of negates the purpose of the body camera. So there's an array of things, but the bigger issue here is the cost. All right, so the average body camera cost is anywhere between $400 and $600. So you can imagine, even the small police department, the cost that's associated with that again, plus the costs associated with storage for the data. Many police departments, especially smaller departments with smaller budgets, have tried and later suspended body-worn camera programs, citing rising costs of cameras, maintenance of the programs, employees, and data storage. All right. Employees are concerned about privacy issues. The public is concerned about privacy issues. So there's an array of things. So as an agency, when you're evaluating whether or not to use body-worn cameras, we need to understand that there are definitely some pros and cons associated with both. One of the critical elements you have to address is the criminal justice system and body-worn cameras, and what impact might it have on the criminal justice system or elements of the criminal justice system. And I'm just going to briefly talk about the courts. So body-worn cameras may make the prosecutor's job easier, all right? So a prosecutor that has evidence supported by the body-worn camera, that's pretty good evidence that he can bring into court in terms of trying to convict the defendant for some type of criminal offense, all right? But it could also be used by the defense, all right? So when you looked at the case I referenced earlier of Kim Potter, again, both the defense and the prosecution used that video as part of their strategy, which ultimately led to her conviction for manslaughter. One study has shown that nearly all prosecutors' offices and jurisdictions with body-worn cameras have used body-worn camera evidence to prosecute defendants. So that's how we can positively, in a positive way, positively impact the criminal justice system. There's some negatives to that too, because now there's more discovery issues and the prosecutor may have to review body-worn cameras. Maybe there are multiple officers there, so it might be more time-consuming for prosecutors than what they're normally used to. But again, this is how the body-worn cameras can apply to the criminal justice system. In terms of elements of society, you're looking at the cultural, political, and social factors that influence the use of body cameras. Key here is transparency and accountability, following the use of force by law enforcement officers against members of the community, especially people of color. The idea being that body-worn cameras offer transparency and accountability. It accurately records conversations between the officer and the public with the necessary video. Again, the video may not always be visible. If there's a struggle that occurs or somehow the video camera is impaired and they're not able to record the actual video, but you have audio, so there's an array of things. But nonetheless, understanding that how this device, this technology, impacts the elements of society is, again, this transparency, and accountability. And this is both cultural, political, and social factors, all right? The public would want them. That's a social factor. Political standpoints is politicians are also looking for ways to convey to the public the actions of the police department, whether they were proper or improper, and oftentimes body-worn cameras can fulfill that. So again, transparency and accountability are one of the key ways that body-worn cameras can impact the elements of society. Again, closing thoughts, make sure you carefully review the assignment guidelines, i.e. the number of words required for each critical element, so make sure you take care of that. You should cite and reference sources to support your ideas using APA style. Again, use your textbook. Chapter 13 has a lot of good information, and your module resources to support your ideas in your journal assignments. So you need something to support your ideas as you're arguing the pros and cons associated with body-worn cameras, how they can impact the criminal justice system, and how they impact the elements of society. Okay, and then at the bottom here, what I did is this is just a citation for our textbook using APA style. This is not an ebook. This would be the textbook itself, so it gives you an idea as to how that should look. But your resources offered through Brightspace and the Superior Library would be helpful. Okay, Thank you guys, and I look forward to reading your ideas on the pros and cons of body-worn cameras this week. Bye.